Nearly a year after the FBI raided dentist Jason White's office in South Lubbock, a judge has handed down his sentence for production of child porn. I'm Lauren Motter. Brian will join us tonight at 10. White will spend the next 30 years in federal prison. That's the maximum sentence he was facing. He pleaded guilty to production of child porn back in September. KAMC's Laughead was inside the courtroom during the sentencing and tells us how it unfolded.
Jason White will spend the next 3 decades of his life in prison, and he will never be able to practice dentistry again. Judge James Hendricks saying White used his position and celebrity status to abuse young boys at his home, his dental office, and his ranch. Hendricks telling White in part, quote, "For too long you have preyed on the children of this community, hiding in plain sight." Hendricks added that White's decades of abuse, his number of victims, and repeated manipulation were so disturbing that he initially considered objecting to White's plea agreement because he thought 30 years was too short, but he didn't want to subject the victims to a criminal trial. The sentencing started off with the defense emphasizing White is remorseful for his crimes. White gave a tearful statement to the court saying he himself was sexually abused as a child for years, and he takes responsibility for what he's done, and his, quote, "soul and spirit have been transformed." White apologized to his loved ones and asked for forgiveness. The U.S. Attorney's Office countered by reading 2 letters from victims' families. The first from a victim's grandmother who said White stole her grandson's innocence. The next from a mom of 2 victims who worked for White for 14 years. She condemned his vile actions toward her boys and wants White to, quote, "rot behind prison bars." Then 3 victims shared their testimony. The first was a young man who said he idolized White as a kid, but then White sexually assaulted him when the young man was in 8th grade. He called him perverted and a pedophile and said custody is the safest place for him. Next, testimony from a man around White's age who said he was abused by the former dentist 26 years ago when they both were kids. He called White a predator, and he pointed at White and said, quote, "You know what you have done." The final witness appeared to be a teenager, and there were sobs in the courtroom during his testimony. He said he trusted White, and White would do things for him, but then asked for shocking things in return. The U.S. Attorney's Office concluding by pointing out that in White's statement, he apologized to his friends and family, but not his victims. They also accused White of starting his sexual abuse when he was only 9 or 10 years old. The judge applauded the bravery of all of the victims who have come forward. Judge Hendricks saying he found White's statement appalling. And while he called White's personal abuse terrible, he said it's no excuse or explanation for his actions. Laughead, KAMC News.
And Laura, on top of that prison sentence, White must also forfeit $100,000 in cash, register as a sex offender, and following his release will be under supervised release for life. After that sentencing, White's attorney telling us that he believes the West Texas community is a forgiving one, saying in part, quote, "We're a faith-based community, and I think at this point, as we move forward, you want forgiveness and healing for all involved." As part of his sentencing, White will also pay $3,500 to one of his victims, $5,000 to the Human Trafficking Victims Compensation Fund, and $50,000 to a fund for survivors of sexual assault. He will also be receiving mental health treatment.